Hi everybody, and welcome back to another Business Tube podcast. Now on today's edition we are looking at break even. Now break even, as it says on the board, is basically the point when there's neither a profit nor a loss. Okay? Now in order for there to be no profit and no loss, total revenue has to exactly equal total costs. So if total revenue is 10, total costs are 10, 10 minus 10 would give you 0. Total revenue exactly equals total cost. There's no profit and there's no loss. Now, there's three ways you can go about calculating break-even. You can use a table, which is what I'm going to go through first. A chart, which is what you're most likely to be asked to do in the exam, is actually fill out a break-even graph and create a graph, or using the break-even formula. Okay? Now, before we look at any of those, what I'd like to do first of all is actually have a look at the formulas that are required for break-even. Okay? Now, first of all, in order to calculate total revenue, you should all know this already, but it's the amount sold, or the output, times by the selling price per unit. Okay? So if you sell 10 cans of Coke for $1 each, 10 times 1 means your total revenue is $10. Okay? So this is the income into the business. The total variable costs, now the variable costs are the costs to actually make each product, so the raw materials. So if it was a can of Coke, it would be your sugar, okay? It would be the metal and the water for the actual Coca-Cola itself. Now in order to get the total variable cost, we take the amount sold, okay? And we times it by the variable cost per unit. So if we sold 10 cans of Coke again, and each Coke was $0.5, 10 times 0.5 would give us a total variable cost of 5. Okay? To get the total costs, we need to take the total variable costs and add it to the fixed costs. The fixed costs being the rent, the salaries, the insurance. So the fixed costs being the costs that do not change. Okay? So we add those together to get the total cost. And one of the key mistakes that many students make is that they add the variable cost per unit. Remember, it's the total variable cost. Okay? So you have to do this calculation first to get the total variable cost. Then you add it to the fixed costs. Okay? So if we go back to the previous example, you wouldn't add 0.5 because that is the variable cost per 1 can of Coke, per 1 unit. Okay? You do the 0.5 per 1 can times the 10 cans that you've sold, which will give you 5. So it's the fixed cost plus 5. Okay? So just remember, it's total variable costs that you use in order to get total cost. Profit or loss, that is total revenue minus total cost. And the margin of safety we will look at, and that is the difference between the break-even and the actual level of sales. So if your break-even is 10, but you're selling 15, then your margin of safety would be 5. It's how safe are you, how far away from your break-even point are you. Okay? Now, the first ways that you would have to do this is using a table. Now, the first one that I'm going to put on there are the fixed costs. So at every level of output, the fixed costs are 2,000. Because remember, fixed costs do not change with output. Fixed costs stay the same with output, so it's 2,000 all the way down. Doesn't matter how big or how small your output is, the fixed costs are always the same. To get our total variable cost, if the variable cost is 2, then we do 2 times the output. If you think back to the formula before, it's the output times the variable cost per unit. So 0 times 2 is 0, 200 times 2 is 400, and so on. In order to get the total costs, we add them together, okay? And that will give us the total costs. And then sales revenue, we take the selling price, which in this case is 4, so that's how much we're charging per 1 product, and we times it by the number of products we've sold. So 200 times 4, okay, is 800. I'll have to get out of the way here. 400 times 4 is 1,600, and so on. Now remember, the break-even point is the point when total revenue exactly equals total cost. So here, total cost is 4,000. Here, sales revenue is 4,000. They are exactly the same, so the break-even is 1,000 units. We always express it in how many units do you need to sell in order to break even. So remember, if you think back to the profit formula, profit is total revenue minus total costs. 4,000, which is total revenue, minus 4,000 would give 0. So we are breaking even here because total revenue exactly equals total costs. Okay, so the break-even point is 1,000 units. Remember, it's expressed in units not in pounds. In this example, okay, the break-even point is 200 units, because in this example, sales revenue is 800 and total costs are 800. So at this point, the business breaks even at 200 output. Okay. Now, if you think back to margin of safety, if the business is actually selling 1,000 outputs, how safe are they? Basically, how far away from that break-even point are you? Well, 1,000 minus 200 means that this business is safe by 800 units. Remember, the margin of safety is how far away from the break-even point are you? Okay, so we take the actual level of output, we minus the break-even, which means this business is safe by 800 units. The next way, which is the most likely way that you are going to have to do in your exam, is to actually create a break-even chart. Now, across the bottom we have output, basically the amount of units sold, and up here we have revenue and costs. Now, fixed cost is a straight line. Okay, remember, as output increases, fixed costs stay the same. So it does not change, they do not change with output, and that is why that is a straight line. And that should be the first line that you draw on your break-even chart. Next up, you can draw the total cost line. Now remember, the total cost line, whatever total cost is at this level of output, remember this line joins to here, where fixed costs start, or end should I say, where fixed costs end, and not down to here to 0. Because remember, total costs are fixed costs, which is this, plus your variable cost, which is this. So it connects here and not here, because that's where total costs start at this point here. Remember, total costs are fixed costs plus your variable costs. Okay, that's why the line starts there. We then draw the total revenue line. Now remember, if you've got 0 output, total revenue is 0, because if your selling price is 5 and you sell nothing, 0 times 5 would be nothing. So total revenue starts down here. Okay, so that's a straight line down to there. And in break-even, it's always a straight line. If you have any bends, any curves in your line, then you have made a mistake. The break-even point, as we know, remember, total break-even is when total revenue exactly equals total cost. So the break-even point is where those two lines meet. So it's when total revenue meets total costs. Okay? So the break-even point on this particular graph is 2,500 units. Okay? If we were to draw a line down there, the break-even point is 2,500 units, because that's when total revenue exactly equals total costs at this point here. Okay? If total revenue is higher than total costs, up here we make a profit because total revenue is more than total costs, and down here we make a loss because total revenue is less than total costs. And if total revenue is less than total costs, then we make a loss. Okay? The break-even point is that point exactly in the middle. Okay? So this is the most likely one that you're going to have to do in the exam, is draw a chart like this. We also have the break-even formula. Now with the break-even formula, we take the fixed costs and we do the selling price minus the variable cost per unit. Now remember, this time it's the variable cost per unit, not the total variable cost. So total, it's the fixed costs divided by selling price minus the variable cost per unit. Okay, so just a few examples on the board here. If fixed costs are 66,000, okay, we've got the selling price on here and the variable cost, and that gives us a break-even point of 10.15. Okay. Right, what I've done for you is on the board, I have put an example on here, and I'm hoping you can see all of this. So I've got the selling price as 10 per unit, the fixed cost is 2,000, and the variable cost here as 5 per unit. Now the first thing that you do is you need to draw the fixed costs on there. Okay? So the fixed costs are 2,000, so we draw a straight line. Obviously you guys would use a ruler. Okay, a straight line across, and these are the fixed costs. So a nice straight line for the fixed costs at 2,000. These are in thousands, and across the bottom, these are in hundreds. So we draw a straight line across for fixed costs. I would always do the total revenue line next. So the selling price is 10, so $10 per unit. And what we do is we come to the very far as far along the bottom axis as you can to the highest output. So the output here goes up to 5 or 500, okay? I should actually have 100 on there. So we do 5 times 10 or 500 times 10, and that would give a total revenue as 5,000. So we go up from 5, just follow it up, and obviously in the exam you guys will have a grid reference as well. So at 500 output, 500 times 10 gives a total revenue of 5,000, if we can see that there, okay? So 500 output, 5,000, and then we draw the line, and remember total revenue line connects right to 0. Please make sure you do use a ruler, and you have a ruler in the exam, and you don't draw lines like me, otherwise you'll make a mistake, okay? So just a very rough version. Next we have to get the total costs, and this is the hardest one to do. Now, in order to get total costs, we have to take the variable cost per unit, which is 5, okay? We times it by the most output here, which is 500, okay? 500 times 5, if we're using this one, remember, go across the bottom axis output to the highest one. The highest one is 500, so we do 500 times 5, which is 2,500. That is the total variable cost. But remember, to get total costs, we have to take the total variable cost and we have to add it to fixed costs. So 2,500 plus the fixed costs of 2,000 gives the total costs of 4,500. So if I go up from 5 to 4,500, remember this is a very rough version, that would put total cost about there. And the key thing to remember is, remember, total cost does not connect to 0, we connect it to fixed costs, because total costs are fixed costs plus the total variable cost. So this line comes down here like this, and the break even is there. Okay, we label this the break even point. So on here the break even point is 400. 400 output is the break even point. And I've done the break even formula here already to check it, and I hope you guys can see this. But the output is, the fixed costs are 2,000. The selling price is 10. The variable cost per unit is 5. 10 minus 5 is 5. Always do the bit in brackets first. Don't put that into your calculator like that or you'll make a mistake. You all know what 10 minus 5 is. So 10 minus 5 is 5. 2,000 divided by 5 would give 400 units, which is what our break-even chart says. Okay. Hopefully this example is a bit better than the one that I had on there before. Remember, it's the selling price minus the variable cost per unit. Okay. So it's not the total revenue, it's not the total variable cost, it's the selling price for 1 unit, the variable cost for 1 unit. Okay. 10 minus 5 is 5. 2,000 divided by 5 is 400 units. Okay, so using the break-even formula, the contribution is basically the bottom part of the break-even formula. So the bit at the bottom that's in brackets, the selling price minus the variable cost per unit, that is the contribution. Basically, if we sell a product for 10 and it costs us 5 to make it, so if the variable cost of raw materials are 5, every time we sell one, it costs us 5 to make it and we sell it for 10. So 10 minus 5 means every time we sell one, it's contributing to our business $5 or whatever. Okay, so if you sell it for 10 and it costs you 5 to make it, every time you sell a product, it contributes 5 to your business. It doesn't contribute 10 because remember it costs you 5 already to make it. So the contribution per unit is just the bottom part of the break-even formula. Okay. Now you need to know the uses of break-even charts. Now the use of break-even charts allows the business obviously to see how many units it needs to sell to break even and how many units it needs to sell before it starts making a profit, because remember, any units that you sell above the break even point are going to be profit. Now if you calculate that your break even is 200 and you only think you're going to sell 180, then you know this business is not a business you want to do, because you're not going to sell enough to be able to make a profit. Okay, so how many sales do I need to make in order to cover my costs and start to make money, start to make profit? Okay. It also allows us to do what-if analysis. I like to think of this like what if. What if my price increases? What if my price decreases? What if my variable cost, my raw materials get more expensive? What happens if I move to a cheaper location and I have cheaper rent? That will reduce the fixed cost line. Okay. So what-if analysis. What if things change? How will that affect my break-even? How will that affect my profit? Okay. And it also allows you to see your margin of safety. How safe are we? Okay, how far above our break-even point are we? If our break-even point is here and we're selling this many products, then we're quite safe. We're far away from our break-even point. But if our break-even point's here and the amount that you're selling is here, you're very close to your break-even point. So if sales fall by a little bit, you're no longer going to be in profit, you're going to be making a loss. So again, it allows the business to see the margin of safety as well. There are some very big drawbacks to a break-even analysis though. So remember the example I've just done on the board. Break-even requires a single selling price, a single variable cost price. Now, very few businesses have one single selling price. If you think about a supermarket, they sell thousands of different products at thousands of different selling prices, different amounts, so you can't even take an average because one product might sell 1,000 in a day whereas another one might sell 6. So you're selling different products with different prices and selling different amounts. It's very difficult if you sell many different products to have one selling price. It's also very difficult to have one variable cost per unit, okay? So if you sell many different products, it's hard to create an accurate break-even point, okay? And also remember, costs change. If you're a taxi driver, your fuel will change, so that means your variable cost will change. If you're a business, then your variable costs can change all the time. Your suppliers might change prices, etc. Now, if any of your prices change, your selling price changes because you have a special offer on, a discount. If your variable costs change or your fixed costs change, if any part changes, then basically your break-even is wrong and it's a wasted activity. It's going to be inaccurate, so you're going to have to do it again. Okay, so there are some big drawbacks to break-even as well. You may get asked the 3 ways to lower break-even, and these are quite straightforward, guys. If you want to lower your break-even, you have 3 options and 3 options only, because there are only 3 lines on a break-even chart. If you want to break even sooner, you can increase your selling price, okay? Or you can get your costs down, any of them. Reduce your costs, you'll break even sooner and you'll start making a profit quicker. So get your variable costs down, e.g. find a cheaper supplier, or get your reduce your fixed costs, such as move to cheaper rents, okay, and get a smaller location if you don't need a big location. Any of those 3 methods will allow you to break even sooner and start making profit quicker, okay? So that's it from me today, guys. I hope you find that useful, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.